I want you to try and picture a massive global oil crisis.
Right. And for most people, that instantly brings up the 1970s.
Exactly. You imagine long gas lines, people fighting at the pumps, crazy inflation, and just total economic panic.
Yeah, the classic textbook crisis.
Yeah.
Supermarket shelves completely stripped bare of, like, toilet paper and detergent.
And in Japan, it was even worse. They had to switch off the famous neon signs in the Ginza district just to ration power.
Which makes total sense, for a Rocky Island nation that has to import pretty much every single drop of oil it uses.
Right. It was devastating. But now, I want you to fast forward to the 2000s.
Okay.
Global oil prices surge again, and this time the volatility is actually way worse than the 70s.
Way, way worse. A massive, sustained, parabolic surge.
You'd expect absolute devastation all over again. Total chaos.
But the reality was completely anticlimactic.
Exactly. The streets of Tokyo were dead quiet. No panic buying, no massive inflation.
The Japanese economy barely even registered a tremor.
So the big question, the mission of our deep dive today, is why did this black gold suddenly lose its magic ability to crash the Japanese economy?
It genuinely stands as one of the most counterintuitive economic anomalies of the modern era. I mean, it goes against everything we think we know.
Right, because if you're walking through a cloud of a deadly virus and you don't get sick, everyone assumes you have some superhuman immune system.
Yeah, they assume your body mutated to fight it off.
But what if we open the black box and the data shows it's not a superhuman immune system at all? What if it's actually just about the very specific, weird layers of clothing you happen to be wearing?
I love that analogy. Because today, we are looking at an incredible study by two scholars, Etsuro Shioji and Taisuke Uchino.
And they basically tracked 30 years of massive data sets to uncover how Japan pulled this off, right?
Exactly. They mapped the entire circulatory system of the Japanese economy. They tracked the journey of a single drop of oil.
From the crude global prices at the import docks, all the way down to the retail price you pay for something super mundane like a plastic garden hose.
Yeah, they wanted to find out where exactly the price shock just evaporates along that chain.
And to do that, they used a model that honestly sounds like a piece of space shuttle equipment.
And you're talking about the time-varying parameter vector autoregression model.
Yes, the TVP-VAR model. Please break that down for us because it sounds terrifying.
It does sound intense, but think of a standard economic model as a photograph.
Okay, like a snapshot in time.
Right. It captures how things relate at one specific moment. But economies are living, breathing things. A factory in 1980 reacts to oil prices totally differently than a factory in 2000.
Because things change, technology, laws, whatever.
Exactly. So a TVP-VAR model is more like a video camera. It lets the mathematical relationships actually shift and evolve across decades of data.
So they ran 30 years of data through this moving video camera model.
And they were able to isolate exactly when the Japanese economy's sensitivity to oil just started to degrade.
Which brings us to this crucial term they use, the pass-through rate.
Right, the pass-through rate.
If the global price of crude goes up by 10%, the pass-through rate is how much of that 10% actually hits you, the consumer.
Are you paying 10% more for groceries or 5% or 0?
And the data shows a literal cliff edge drop.
Oh, it's a massive drop. Between 1982 and 2002, the pass-through rate from the wholesale price down to the consumer price plummeted.
By how much?
By an astonishing 8.6%.
Wait, almost 80% of the price shock just vanished.
Poos. Gone into thin air.
Okay, that is wild. And this is where the study gets really spicy because it completely aggressively debunks the obvious textbook answer.
Yeah, the common sense answer that everyone always gives.
Right. If you ask anyone why Japan survived the oil shock, they'll say, oh, Japanese cars are super efficient.
They'll point to green tech, hybrid cars, lean manufacturing.
Like human ingenuity and incredible engineering just saved the day.
It's a very seductive narrative, right?
Right.
We want to believe technology shields us. But the data shows that's actually a myth.
A total myth. The researchers used two different models to test this, the real input-output model and the nominal input-output model.
Yes. Think of these input-output tables as the master recipe book for the whole national economy.
Like exactly how much steel, rubber, and electricity it takes to build one car.
Precisely. And the real model, the physical tracking model, strips away all the messy money and inflation stuff. It just looks at the raw physical volumes.
So if the factories really were just using less physical oil because they were so efficient, the real model would show a massive drop.
Exactly. But it didn't. The physical model predicted that technological efficiency only accounted for a tiny 7.1% drop in the pass-through rate.
7.1%. But the actual drop we just talked about was over 61% in that sector.
Right, meaning there is a massive gaping hole in the data. Over 50% of the immunity had absolutely nothing to do with physical energy efficiency.
So wait, all those hyper-efficient assembly lines and hybrid cars weren't the saviors.
They helped a little, but they were not the main character of this story. The factories still physically needed almost as much oil as before.
Okay, so if the secret wasn't in the physical engineering, where was it hiding?
It was hiding in the math of the money itself, which brings us to the nominal input-output model.
Right, the financial tracker.
Yeah. And this model revealed a truth that is shockingly simple. Honestly, it feels almost too simple.
Lay it on us.
The primary reason Japan became immune from 1980 to 2000 was simply that oil became drastically cheaper relative to everything else.
Okay, relative prices. That can sound a bit abstract. Let me try an analogy here to see if it makes sense.
Go for it.
Think about baking a loaf of bread. The main costs are flour, yeast, rent, and the baker's wages.
Right. Flour is your massive physical and financial ingredient.
So if a global wheat crisis hits and flour doubles in price, the bakery is in huge trouble. They have to double the price of a baguette or they go bankrupt.
Exactly.
But what if the price of salt suddenly surges by 1,000%? Does the bakery panic?
Not at all. Because salt is a microscopic fraction of the overall cost.
Yeah.
Even if it goes up 1,000%, it's still just fractions of a penny.
It's just a tiny sliver on the spreadsheet.
Right. You're not going to double the price of a baguette because salt got expensive.
So what you're saying is, by the year 2000, oil had basically become the salt of the Japanese manufacturing sector.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Because over those 2 decades, the global price of oil had trended downward. But crucially, other costs were rising.
Like labor costs. Japan was becoming a very wealthy, advanced economy.
Exactly. Wages were going up. The cost of other non-oil materials was going up. The whole pie was getting bigger, but the oil slice was shrinking.
It lost its leverage over the company's bottom line.
Yes. So when the 2000 supercycle hit and oil suddenly tripled, it was tripling a number that was already mathematically tiny.
It wasn't enough to force them to raise the price of the final product.
Exactly. So the irony here is amazing. It wasn't human ingenuity that saved the day initially.
It was just sheer dumb luck.
Basically, yeah. Just the sheer dumb luck of global market pricing making oil a smaller line item.
Which really strips away the romance of the story.
It does. But we have to note, relative pricing wasn't the only layer of armor. There were man-made mechanisms absorbing the hits, too.
And this next mechanism is something that is going to feel like a slap in the face to anyone who drives a car.
Oh, absolutely.
Ah.
We're talking about taxes.
Right. You probably hate high taxes at the gas pump. Every time you fill up, you complain about it.
Everyone does. But the researchers found that in an oil crisis, these deeply unpopular taxes actually act like an economic Kevlar vest.
Okay, you have to explain this. How does a tax protect my wallet? That sounds completely backwards.
It's all about the specific DNA of the Japanese tax code. In the year 2000, gasoline taxes in Japan made up an incredible 53.8% of the total retail price of gas.
Over half the price was just a government tax?
Yes. But the really important part isn't just the size of the tax, it's the structure. Japan's fuel taxes are per-unit taxes, not percentage-based.
Okay, let's break that math down. Because normally, with a percentage tax, like a sales tax, if the price of the good goes up, the tax goes up with it.
Right. If you have a 10% tax and oil costs $1, you pay 10 cents in tax. Total is $1.10.
But if oil doubles to $2, your tax doubles to 20 cents. The tax actually amplifies your pain.
Exactly. But a per-unit tax is just a fixed flat fee per physical liter of liquid.
Yeah.
It never changes no matter what the market is doing.
So if the retail price is 50 cents for the oil and a massive fixed 50-cent tax, you pay $1.
Right. Now, a crisis hits. The crude oil doubles from 50 cents to $1.
But the tax stays locked at 50 cents.
Yes. So the final price you pay is $1 for the oil plus the 50-cent tax. You pay $1.50.
Wait, so the raw material went up 100%, but my final price only went up 50%.
Exactly. The massive fixed tax base acts like an anchor. It completely dilutes the percentage volatility of the final product.
That is wild. The very thing citizens protest against is exactly what's preventing their personal finances from collapsing.
It is entirely counterintuitive. And the researchers proved this by looking at a real-world natural experiment in Japan involving two types of fuel.
Right, diesel versus type A fuel.
Yeah. Now, physically, chemically, these two liquids are virtually identical. You could run a diesel engine on either one.
But legally, they are treated completely differently.
Radically differently. Diesel is heavily taxed with that fixed per unit fee. But type of fuel is used by farmers and fishermen, so the government makes it almost completely tax-free to subsidize them.
Okay, so you have the exact same physical liquid exposed to the exact same global oil market, but one has a massive tax and one doesn't. What happened?
When global oil spikes, the price of that tax-free type of fuel just swings violently. The farmers feel the absolute unmitigated brunt of the shock instantly.
Wow.
But the heavily taxed diesel, the price line on the graph stays remarkably smooth and stable.
It's like the tax is a giant industrial suspension system.
It really is. It forces you to rethink taxes. It's like paying for a massive insurance policy during peacetime so you don't go bankrupt during wartime.
Okay, so a government can slap a flat tax on a uniform liquid, like gasoline, but they can't do that to, like, a plastic garden hose or a Tupperware container.
Right. There's no 50-cent flat tax on random hardware store items.
So what protects all the random manufactured goods? If it's not taxes, what is it?
To find out, the researchers took us downstream. They traced the journey of oil through the plastic supply chain.
Plastics are a perfect case study since they're basically just synthesized petroleum anyway.
Exactly. They tracked it from crude oil down to liquid naphtha, then chemically cracked into basic petrochemicals, then synthesized into raw plastic resin, and finally molded into a consumer plastic hose.
So 4 distinct steps. And what did the price shock look like as it traveled down that chain?
It decayed. The further downstream a product travels, the more the oil price signal just fades away.
So at the top, if crude spikes, the liquid naphtha spikes almost equally.
Right, the transmission is near perfect.
Yeah.
But by the time it becomes a petrochemical, the transmission drops. When it's a resin, it drops again.
And by the time it's a garden hose on a retail shelf, the original shock is just gone. Why?
Because of all the other costs piling up on top of it. By the time you're holding a hose, the cost of the actual petroleum molecules is buried.
Buried under what?
Under the cost of the factory labor, the electricity to run the molding machines, the marketing, the packaging, the transportation, the retail markup.
Ah, so it's the salt analogy again, but applied across a whole sprawling supply chain.
Exactly. The longer and more complex the chain, the quieter the noise of the original resource.
Because every time it changes hands, the oil becomes a smaller and smaller percentage of the total value.
Right. But it's also about the companies themselves playing a hiding game. If you're the guy making the resin and your costs go up, do you pass 100% of that to the hose manufacturer?
Probably not, because you're terrified they'll buy from your competitor instead.
Exactly. So you absorb a little bit of the hit into your own profit margin, you eat some of the cost.
And then the hose manufacturer eats a little bit of the cost.
And the retailer eats a little bit.
Yeah.
So across 5 or 6 steps, the shock is just organically diluted by the complexity of modern business.
That is fascinating. So the whole economy is essentially running on painkillers. They're using taxes, relative math, and downstream hiding games to ignore a bad knee.
That's a great way to put it. The underlying dependence didn't change, they just masked the pain. Except there was one massive exception.
Right, one sector that actually went in and got a total knee replacement.
Yes, the electricity sector.
Because when the researchers looked at the real physical models for the power grid, it actually did show a huge drop in oil dependence.
This was the only major area where real physical substitution actually took place.
So they weren't just playing accounting tricks.
No. Starting in the 1980s and 90s, Japan's power grid aggressively swapped out oil-fired power plants for nuclear power and imported liquid natural gas, or LNG.
They fundamentally changed the physical recipe of their electricity.
Exactly. So that was a true structural victory.
Okay, so let's zoom out. By the late 90s, Japan has this hyper-complex, heavily taxed, perfectly balanced system. And it worked beautifully for 20 years.
It did. It was a masterpiece of economic shock absorption.
But then the 2000s hit, and the math completely breaks.
Absolutely shattered. Because global oil prices exploded, the supercycle began.
Right. And suddenly, oil was no longer the cheap salt in the recipe. It became violently expensive again.
It reclaimed its spot as a major, heavy cost on the corporate spreadsheets. The relative price math reversed.
So according to the researchers' models, this should have been doomsday.
It should have been. Based on the models, because oil was so expensive again, consumer retail prices should have surged by over 58%.
58%. That would be catastrophic inflation.
Right, but they didn't.
They only bumped up a tiny 15.7%, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the part that blows my mind. The math reversed. It wasn't taxes this time. It wasn't efficiency. Where did that missing 40% of inflation go? Someone has to pay for the expensive oil.
The companies themselves paid for it.
Wait, what? Japanese businesses just absorbed the massive losses.
Yes, they just ate the cost.
But why? That makes no sense. Capitalism is about profit. You don't just hemorrhage cash voluntarily.
You do if you are absolutely terrified of losing your customers. Economists call this the temporary shock hypothesis.
Okay, break that down for me.
You have to understand the psychology of Japan in the 2000s. They had just gone through the lost decades of the 90s.
Deflation, prices never went up. Nobody expected prices to go up.
Right. So imagine you're a CEO. Your oil costs just tripled. You know you need to raise prices. But you look at your competitor and you think, if I raise my prices by 10% and my competitor keeps theirs flat.
The Japanese consumer will see it as a total betrayal, and I'll lose my market share overnight.
Exactly. It was a brutal game of corporate chicken. So instead of raising prices, they slashed their own profit margins. They drained their cash reserves.
They convince themselves, oh, this oil spike is just temporary. We just have to hold our breath and bleed cash until prices drop.
I mean, some people might look at that and say, wow, what amazing corporate social responsibility. They protected the consumer.
Yeah, that's the romantic view.
But realistically, this is just cutthroat, terrified market behavior. They'd rather bleed to death than lose a single customer to a rival.
Absolutely. It was fear, not charity.
Hmm.
And to survive that bleeding, they pulled a new lever, something they couldn't do in the 70s.
Oh, this is the dark part of the story.
Yeah, it really is, because the 70s in Japan was the era of the lifetime employment system. The classic salaryman.
You join a company, you stay for life, wages are rigid, you can't just fire people or cut their pay.
Right. So in the 70s, companies couldn't squeeze the workers, so they had to squeeze the consumers with high prices.
But by the 2000s, the labor market had changed drastically. They deregulated labor laws in the 90s. Suddenly, you had this massive rise in non-regular employment.
Part-time workers, dispatch staff, contractors.
Exactly. The freeders, workers with lower wages and zero job security.
So when the oil spike hit, the companies didn't raise product prices. Instead, they just brutally squeezed this new, vulnerable labor force to pay for the oil.
Yes. They suppressed wages, cut bonuses, hired more temps instead of full-time staff. They effectively transferred the cost of the geopolitical shock directly onto the backs of the Japanese workers.
Wow. So the inflation didn't vanish, it just mutated. It turned from high prices at the store into stagnant careers and financial insecurity for millions of people.
That's exactly right. The headline inflation numbers stayed flat, but the societal cost was immense.
But even with all the corporate bleeding, the labor squeezing, there was still one final weapon keeping everything anchored.
And it was purely psychological.
From the government, right, the central bank.
Yes, the Bank of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Because inflation is often just a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, talk to me about the vibes of inflation, because this is fascinating.
It's called the wage price spiral. If you, as a consumer, firmly believe that prices are going to skyrocket next year, what do you do today?
I go to my boss and demand a raise so I can afford to live next year.
And how does your boss pay for your raise?
By raising the price of the stuff the company sells.
Boom. You instantly created the exact inflation you were afraid of. Panic creates reality.
So how did Japan stop that panic?
Well, in 1998, they passed a law that gave the Bank of Japan total legally binding independence from the political government.
Why does that matter? Why does a plastics factory manager care if the bank is independent?
Because politicians face elections, and politicians love to pressure central banks to print money and juice the economy right before an election.
Which causes inflation.
Right. So if the public thinks the bank is just a puppet for politicians, they won't believe the bank has the guts to fight inflation, because fighting inflation means raising interest rates and causing pain.
But by making the bank fully independent, they gave it massive credibility.
Exactly. So when the oil shock hit, the independent Bank of Japan stood up and firmly projected, we will not allow an inflation spiral.
And because they were independent, the public actually believed them.
Yes. The workers didn't demand huge preemptive raises because they believed inflation would be controlled.
And because wages didn't spike, the companies didn't preemptively raise prices.
It's like an economic Jedi mind trick. The psychological anchor actually prevented the price spiral from ever starting.
That is incredible. So they built this perfect storm of resilience, and when you compare it globally, the contrast is just absurd.
Oh, the global numbers are wild. The researchers looked at the pass-through rates for other Asian countries during the same 2000s oil boom.
Right, using data from Jongwon Park.
Yeah. So Japan's pass-through rate was hovering way down between 0.06 and 0.12.
Extremely low.
Mm-hmm.
But what about a resource-rich country like Indonesia? They literally produce oil.
Indonesia's pass-through rate was almost double Japan's at 0.22.
Wait, really?
Yes,
Yeah.
China was at 0.14.
This is the ultimate irony. Japan, a rocky island with zero natural resources, had far more stable prices than massive resource-rich giants.
It really forces you to reevaluate how civilization survives resource scarcity.
Because the 70s oil crisis didn't magically disappear. It was just absorbed by this hyper-complex, highly taxed, psychologically anchored system.
They constructed a national shock absorber.
Which brings us to the final provocative thought of this deep dive, something for you, the listener, to really mull over.
Because we are attempting something huge today.
Exactly. Right now, we are trying to move off oil completely. We're entering the era of green energy. Electric vehicles, solar grids.
We're basically swapping one dependency for another.
Right. Instead of petroleum, the new lifeblood is lithium, cobalt, rare earth metals, advanced semiconductors.
The new black gold.
So the terrifying question is, what happens when a geopolitical crisis chokes off the global lithium supply?
Or if a supply chain issue halts the export of microchips.
Does this 30-year-old economic shock-absorbing system built for liquid petroleum still work for solid-state batteries and silicon?
Will the green tech supply chains be complex enough to dilute the shock?
Will we have the right taxes in place to buffer the consumer? Will central banks have the credibility to stop the panic when lithium quadruples in price?
That's an open question.
Or when the next oil crisis arrives in the name of green energy, where we suddenly find out that our economic Kevlar doesn't stop this entirely new type of bullet.
Definitely something to keep an eye on the next time a tech company quietly announces a price hike.
Exactly. Because what looks like a superhuman immune system might just be the specific clothes we're wearing. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.